Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Enough, I get the point.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Have a pretty interesting conversation here today. One of the things that Doc and I kind of hit on when we did our This Week in X-Men was the malleability, I believe is the word that Doc used, the ability of the superhero genre itself to conform and make itself into other genres where you can have a Western superhero comic, or you can have a slice of life superhero comic, but at the core of it, should always be the superhero genre itself, which is, characters likely with superpowers, with missions that are bigger than themselves, doing superhero type things, but in the service of other people, essentially, good acts, saving people, saving the universe a lot of times. But at what point does the superhero genre itself end up being consumed when you try to mix it with other genres? When does it stop being a superhero comic just at all? And the superheroes themselves are just in the background as a means to bring people in, but the obvious intention of the book is other things, not really to tell a superhero story. Obviously, here with me to talk about that is the X-Men historian, the Marvel aficionado. Doc, how you doing?
I am very good, sir. This is a topic that I contemplated doing my own video on, but you are much better at framing these discussions. So I just end up wandering off into some nonsense, and nobody would watch it. So thank you for having me here.
People would watch it, but so it's an interesting concept. Obviously, throughout time, you look at the Watchmen. What's the worst that could happen? It was superheroes. Maybe if they weren't so super. Obviously, it was also telling there's a lot of Cold War dynamics going on there. You look at something like God Loves, Man Kills by Chris Claremont. Certainly, X-Men have always, not always, but they are an allegory for minority groups, other marginalized groups. In God Loves, Man Kills, that was certainly at the forefront of that story. Almost the superhero aspect, it maybe took a backseat to that particular story, but for the most of the rest of Claremont's run, it was a superhero story while adding things into it. So you can mold the superhero genre to get other ideas out there. Certainly with Captain America, you can get like a spy suspense kind of thriller vibe to it while using the superhero genre. So this has certainly been going on for a long time, but you think recently, maybe within the last 10, 15 years, the superhero aspects of it are starting to take a backseat.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think that there's some degree of proof in that in just watching the sales and the enthusiasm for it, for comics in general. I mean, we look at the way that the movies have grown and grown and grown from all the way back from the, let's just start at the beginning of the MCU. Iron Man 1, dollar-wise, would be considered an absolute failure today based on what the expectation is, because Marvel kind of showed, hey, look, we can take these characters and we can do a spy story, we can do a period piece, we can do a science fiction or a space opera, and we can do mythology, we can do horror,
magic and mystical elements.
Yeah, and but at the core, all of them were still superhero stories. They're that hero's journey, except for the beautiful thing about comics is because they're serialized storytelling, that journey never has to end. I mean, it can eventually, when you kill a character, when you write them off to walk off into the sunset and go enjoy their retirement, sure, you can do that, but you can make that hero's journey never stop. And you watch the way that viewers and customers have reacted to the use of that in film, and every single one of those is still quintessentially a superhero story. And They might add the veneer of whatever this other genre is onto it, and every single movie has exceeded the previous in interest, in revenue, in the number of times people see it.
Well, not all of them increase.
No,
Obviously,
no.
the Avengers are outliers. Something like an Ant-Man and Wasp was never expected to exceed Black Panther. But
No.
I get what you're saying, that they're stepping up as far as interest in revenue.
Yes, exactly. And even like Ant-Man and the Wasp did better than Ant-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So each sequential one has done better than its previous iteration because people see what it is. Whereas the comics just keep dropping. Now, there's a lot of other factors involved with comic sales and comic readership dropping. There's price point, there's quality, there's relative ease of access.
Distribution's a big issue.
Yeah, but at the same time, the stories have gotten away from it. The heroes are becoming less and less heroic. It's no longer being a hero's journey. It's a superpowered asshole's journey. Or and sometimes barely even a superpowered person. It's just, Jim, the guy that you sort of don't like from work, except for he has powers and maybe he's gonna and he goes out and saves the world because I guess he has to. There's nothing, the characters have become less and less redeeming. The stories have gotten away from it, but it'd be like if you made a story about that guy, except for 90% of the pages are him sitting in his office complaining about his boss.
It's interesting. I think one of the issues that's come up, in my personal, and this isn't comic books. This is kind of fiction in general, where the villains themselves have become much more sympathetic.
Absolutely.
Like when you think of Apocalypse, you've got Charles Xavier. He's got the dream of mutants and humans living together side by side. You have Magneto, who doesn't believe that's possible, and mutants need to look after themselves. And you have Apocalypse, who thinks mutants are the ultimate end goal and the supreme life form, and we need to weed out even the weak mutants. So you have a progression up to an even crazier state as far as an ideology regarding human-mutant relations.
Yeah, I mean, like Apocalypse is just, there's merit to either argument between Xavier and Magneto, but Apocalypse's philosophy is just straight up ice cold. And there is no humanity to it. There's not even any morality to it. It's just straight up survival of the fittest. And
so you get to House of X Powers of 10, we start setting up the story with the original 4 horsemen that were sealed in the breach with Arakko and Okara and Krakoa. And it turns out Apocalypse wasn't so bad. His family is stuck on the other side of the breach. Eventually, he knows that they're going to have to go and fight to bring them back. And he's just been, he's been biding his time and hoping to bring his family back. He's not such a bad guy.
Yeah, in which case, all he would have had to do, he doesn't have to kill people to do that. He just builds an army and trains them better. I mean, that's...
Doc, you're talking about a plot point that doesn't quite work out. I'm just saying the framing of the character has changed dramatically to where he's no longer, what he believes in is so evil that he's the bad guy, whereas today he's pretty sympathetic. He's borderline the good guy. Think about Avengers Infinity War. Who's the protagonist in that movie?
Oh, it's absolutely Thanos.
It's Thanos. When he presents his argument, he's got a tear in his eye because the world, the galaxy is overpopulated. He needs to cut out half. He doesn't want to do it. He's going to have to sacrifice his own child. And he's quite sympathetic in doing so. It was an enormous sacrifice. You could see that it affected him greatly. And when he's laying out his plans, I believe the only character in that movie that ever says that you are crazy and that is wrong, I think, is Doctor Strange. Otherwise, no one else ever even challenges the thought. And so that entire movie, what is quite villainous, murdering half of the entire population, is essentially presented as a very sympathetic goal, and he comes off as the good guy. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's set up as at least a reasonable position,
Yes.
an arguable position, whereas it's really not. With any degree, you apply any degree of morality to it, and it's not even a remotely reasonable position.
So whereas with Apocalypse and Thanos, which positions that they hold are pretty binary.
They are.
They should be pretty. I don't believe in a completely black and white world. I think there are shades of gray, but those positions should be quite binary. But they're not being presented that, so we're clouding the characterizations of the character where it's getting a little bit gray. But you also have that happening on the hero side. Captain Marvel's the world's mightiest hero. What's the first thing she does in her first big event?
Is just
murders Tony Stark.
Yeah. She just kills somebody for disagreeing with her.
And what happens in the very first Civil War to Tony Stark? He's the villain.
Yeah. And the thing is, and they made, and that was the way that they presented it. They could have, if they wanted to keep it reasonable, they could have made Tony's argument reasonable, but they decided the flaw in that event was that they essentially turned him into a villain by having him get all Machiavellian and start manipulating shit in order to get the outcome he was warning against to justify his position. And the fact that they never addressed that has always been a problem to me, but that's beside the point.
So you have the blurring of the lines between the hero and the villain. And the heroes versus the villain is supposed to be the core of the superhero genre. That is the story, correct?
Correct.
That is the confrontation. Now, there's underlying factors. And you look at, we can take Ant-Man, the first movie. It is a heist movie, but at the core of it, it's about a father wanting to reconnect with his daughter and do something good with her and turn his life around because obviously he was in trouble before and he needs to redeem himself by doing superhero act and going out and fighting evil. And it's pretty clear cut there, but you're telling one genre within another genre, but it's not overtaking.
No, it's not. It's a good balancing act. You have that because that's essentially just a basic redemption and reconnection story and a family story, but you do it via action and adventure and super heroics, and in the process of that he gets his call to action in needing to stop Yellow Jacket from turning this technology into a weapon of war. And so you get all of those things. So that's what keeps it that superhero thing. Because if it was just some guy trying to connect with his daughter and having to act as a superhero in the meantime, that's still not a superhero story. That would be a reconnection family drama movie with that they painted
and his job
superhero over top. Yeah. Whereas this was, he gets that call to action and then becomes a superhero by taking on that responsibility that isn't really his, because he has the ability to stop it and he has the ability to change it. And they've gotten away from that so much in the comic books. Now it's their jobs. It's not because they feel that they should. It's just that there's never any questioning, why am I doing this? What am I putting myself through this for? It's just, gotta go to work.
Also always telling the audience what's wrong with the hero, right?
Yeah.
Tony Stark is a flawed character. He's had battles with alcoholism. He's got an ego problem. His hubris probably needs to be put in check. But in his heart, when the call to action is there, he's dependable. He shows up. He might fail from here and there, but he's never going to give up. He's always going to be there. He's reliable. But if you read like the current Iron Man and the setting up, like there's a moment where there's some scientists and he's got to go like punch through a wall, and he essentially with what happens and everything, like he would like shattered his entire like skeleton. and he's like in the hospital, hemmed up, and the character that's talking to him isn't going, "Oh my goodness, you risked your life, you almost died, saving these scientists." It's like, well, it's a good thing that you have good insurance, unlike everybody else in the world. It's like, what? He just almost died. Let's have a little perspective on this. But that's completely lost. And then throughout, leading up to that, it's Tony Stark on social media. Everything that he does has a negative outcome on everybody, and everyone hates him, even though he saved the galaxy multiple times at this point. Everyone just turns on him immediately. It's just so strange the way that they frame these heroes nowadays. I don't get it.
Well, it's like they don't want you to like the heroes. And what the hell business are you in if you want people to hate your product?
Now, certainly there are stories within superhero comics where the population turns on Captain America, and he's the most wanted man in America, right? So he has to rediscover his honor and prove to the world, and clear his name, or Gotham turns on Batman because it's clear that he did something that he didn't actually do, but he has to clear his name. But it doesn't feel like they have to clear their name now because they're almost guilty of what everyone's mad at him about.
Yeah, they are, and they don't really, and the thing is, they don't even seem to care about clearing their name. They just kind of accept that, well, I'm going to do this, and they're still going to hate me, but oh well. And there's no, I can understand that as a minor plot point from time to time in certain books, and they don't have to be loved. They don't have to be hated. Most people could be completely ambivalent towards them and just accept it as a thing that happens in their world. But this lack of addressing it, this inability to even
acknowledge superheroic acts as heroic, really degrading, degrading the genre. And like you said, it kind of takes away the fabric that this is a superhero story, and it just kind of becomes something else. Whereas the fact that they're superhero becomes secondary, or it's even something that you should maybe can hold in contempt against the character.
Exactly. Being better and doing more things and being more powerful or being smarter or being stronger is somehow a bad thing.
Being stronger and using it for good, because that's obviously what the villain does. He's stronger, maybe smarter, but he's using it for bad. He's using it to hurt people. And that's the juxtaposition between the characters and the inherent conflict between the two. But I almost root for the villain sometimes. It's so strange.
In a lot of cases, I do, because the heroes fucking suck. I mean, because they don't care about being heroes. They're more concerned about what they're having for lunch. They don't try to redeem themselves. They don't try to change the perception in the world. They don't feel any sense of accomplishment for going out and doing good. It's just a fucking job to them.
Now, recently, I love Daredevil. Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil with Marco Cicchetto on art. Great series. Now, the first story arc and what they've been building on, the whole time is that Matt Murdock as Daredevil made a mistake and he killed somebody while stopping a crime, and he ends up meeting the mother of the man, and he wants to make amends, and he eventually turns himself in to do the right thing because he feels like he needs to serve the time, right?
Okay.
While he's in prison, there are some scenes where other prisoners are telling him he has privilege because he's a white superhero. That part, my brother was in prison. It sounded like there were some racial dynamics.
Oh yeah.
So that part, I know some people are upset, but there's a moment where he sits down with like the counselor in prison, and she's checking his privilege. And it's so strange that you're framing this character, Matt Murdock, who's been out there risking his life. He's not super powered. He has super senses, but he gets hurt. He can't fly. He has no regenerative ability. He's been taking a beating essentially, for however long he's been in comics.
Yeah.
He turns himself in to do the right thing, And this person is trying to tell him the reason that he did it, was not for the right reasons. It's just so strange that you're framing the character of Matt Murdock and his actions through this person that I should respect, because this is the counselor from the prison. This isn't a villain. This isn't the dirty mayor or whatever. This is just Joe Schmuckatelli, counselor in the prison, everyday person on the streets, is telling you, the reader, not to respect this character because his motivations are bad.
Yeah, because his motivations are selfish.
Yes.
And I don't understand this. Like, okay, I can kind of, like, I can see the perspective of, yes, it's selfish. If it wasn't for the fact that they go out of their way so often to protect people they don't know, have never met, at all costs to them and no benefit to themselves. It's a literally, I mean, for the most part, incredibly selfless act. And at the same time, you can make the argument that it is a degree of selfish as well, because it's a person that's decided, I have the ability to go out and change the world, therefore I must. So I'm going to, and I will hopefully get to enjoy the fruits of my labor at some point by making the world better.
Yeah, obviously in the real world, you're not going to go and be a vigilante. Maybe you'll go,
you be a cop,
donate some time, donate some money, maybe go out there and, coach a little league team, do something within the community. But here in the superhero world, the way that you go out and affect change is by going and helping people.
Yeah, going and stopping supervillains.
And they've all the writers have almost stripped that nobility away from them of their actions and painted them, as morally ambiguous in comparison even with the villains.
Yeah, they've painted them into almost two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
And
we're seeing that in Batman with the magistrate.
Yeah, that's
the villains are wanted, but the heroes and masks are just as wanted. There are shoot to kill orders for the heroes,
and that's ridiculous.
And that's what the public voted for.
I mean,
this isn't Lex Luthor took over Gotham. This is the people of Gotham who've been protected by Batman and his family for decades now, voted that in because they wanted Batman shot and killed.
Yeah, because these people think that, I mean, they're trying to apply way too much real world. Because you know what? In the real world, if it was the only vigilante that had ever popped up, I could definitely see that, a public saying, nope, we don't want this. Regardless, we don't want either of you. We don't want the hero. We don't want the villain. We don't want this. But this isn't that universe. This is a universe where Superman is flying around, and Gog can show up at any time and level a goddamn city, or Sinestro can show up and basically wipe your whole continent out with a giant yellow hammer.
Yeah. Or quarantine an entire planet.
Yeah.
So where they could no longer receive like goods and services and hold them, under prison.
Yeah, exactly. That's not that universe. I understand applying some degree of realism to superhero comics, but you can't go that far. You cease being superhero comics.
Eventually it's detrimental just to the genre itself. And it doesn't make the characters feel special. And I think that's one of the conclusions I've come to. I do enjoy a lot of comic books. I'm still enjoying Daredevil, but there's a level of cynicism that's happening right down in the narrative that I don't think serves the character. It certainly doesn't serve the title. And I don't know.
There's no hope.
Yeah, at some point, it's no longer a superhero comic. It's just some dickhead trying to help somebody out and like
getting yelled at,
getting sued for it.
Yeah,
you shouldn't have given me the Heimlich. What were you thinking?
Yeah, it's like the pre-Good Samaritan laws. In a sue happy culture. Like, come on, guys. I can understand, like I understand putting in, you want that drama, the consequences, or how is he going to get out of this situation. I understand you want that, but think bigger, people, like
You
creators
can
out
paint
there.
the hero into a corner, but they always have to be heroic. In the end, they have to believe in themselves, and the people around them have to believe in them. Like, listen, we know that you didn't do this, or we know that you're a good person. You just have to go prove it. But there's that part never happens. It's like, man, you really are bad, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, like, they but it's not even just on this subject. It's not even just their perception to the world. It's also how they apply, you other genres over top of it. How
Yeah, they
many
take a back seat.
Yeah, how many I like, if you look at the old, like, Claremont X-Men run, that was a superhero soap opera. That's what it was. There was a lot of that, like, but they didn't take 5 pages of monologues in it. They had to knock that stuff out in 22 pages, and you had to get a little bit of character progression, a little bit of action, a little bit of plot progression, some cool visuals, all in 22 pages before the next chapter of it. Every single one, it was an ongoing story with individual stories every single month, like a chapter that was an entire book. Every Yeah, it was a full and complete episode, and from time to time you'd have 2. But it'd be like, you could, but if you skipped one, you can kind of fill in the blanks between what happened here. And but if you read them out of order, you weren't going to get confused out of order, because okay, this one definitely happened after this. Whereas modern comics, I could walk in today and grab 10 different modern Spider-Man trades off the shelf, and I could not tell you what order they should be in.
Yeah.
Because there's no subplots that continue throughout. There is no
Well, this also, the comic book Western comics just have an enormously terrible way of cataloging and releasing their trades. Like, if you look at manga, guess what it's called? My Hero Academia 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 300.
Yeah. And you know what? Superhero comics used to do that too. Their trade system has always sucked, though. I will say that there is never going to be, unless they just entirely wipe out and start going back to print and start with issue 1 of every single thing and do trades 1 through 6, 6 through, or 7 through 12. Even then, you're going to get doubles on when you get to events and stuff like that. But regardless, you don't get that. You now it'll be, okay, this might have to do with decompression and the way that they're telling stories, where it used to be writing for the single, then it became writing for the trade. Now it's basically right for the omnibus. And this issue is just the everybody sitting around eating dinner issue. The next issue, the thing that used to be 2 pages out of 22 pages, now gets 22 pages out of 400 pages. And we don't want that. Like, there's no consistency to it. I want to be able to pick up, if I'm reading X-Men or if I'm reading Spider-Man, I want to read Peter having financial problems, his date with Mary Jane getting goofed up, while also oh my God, the Norman Osborn is manipulating things from behind the scenes, and I have to go and fight Mysterio to stop him from robbing this bank. 22 pages. Not hard. They did it for decades, but they don't want to do that. Now it's, okay, well, now we're just focusing on Peter being broke, and you'll have entire arcs of that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a job. I think some writers would say, well, that's because consumer tastes have changed.
Bullshit.
I would say the sales indicate that the consumer tastes are not in line exactly with what you're producing right now, because the readership is pretty low right now.
I mean, yeah, maybe consumer tastes have changed, but they haven't changed into the thing you're trying to sell them.
Yeah, at the heart, they still want superheroes doing superhero-like things. The movies tell us that.
Yes, the movie, the success of film, the success of television, all that tell us that. Look at the way that...
When do people get turned off by the CW shows?
When they stop
Season 4, when it just all becomes interpersonal drama, and the superheroes stop being unique because every supporting character by then is a superhero themselves, and it's just about them like hooking up and arguing, and everyone goes, "That sucks now."
Yes, whereas look at Superman and Lois right now, it's full of hope, and there's a lot of uniqueness to being a superhero, and how do you balance that with your real life?
Yeah, well, season 4, Jimmy Olsen will fly. I guarantee it.
Probably.
And he'll be hooking up with Lois's cousin,
who's also somehow
likely to fly.
Yeah, got powers from like black kryptonite or something.
Yes. And it's crazy, Doc. We've had a pretty interesting discussion. At what point does a superhero story or a superhero comic cease to be a superhero anymore? Is it when you take away all the superhero characteristics and almost present them in the same moral light as the villain himself? Is it when the superheroes themselves, the genre of the story, takes a back seat to whatever else you're trying to say, or the morality tale, or whatever social messaging that you're trying to get out there, overtakes the story itself? And I think it's a really interesting discussion. I think people are going to have some things to say about this. And I'll give you the last word, Doc. I'm sure I talked too much and I didn't give you enough opportunities to get your points in. I'm sure there's something else you needed to say before we wrap this up.
The only thing else that I want to add is, look, superheroes, I know I've said this before, superheroes they speak to the mythology that all of human history has loved, from the Greek gods or friggin' ancient aliens, all the way up to Superman, is our want to have somebody that's out there that can really, and our desire to do so ourselves, to have the power to go out and make change and save the world. And the last thing we really want to read is shit that about the fight that we had with our girlfriend and going and bitching about it to our friend at the diner or at the bar. We don't want that.
That should be part of the fabric of the character, but that shouldn't be what the story is.
Exactly. If I wanted to read that, I'd go read some slice of life manga. There's 1,000 things out there that already do this. You're the only one with you're the only genre with the uniqueness to be able to do all of those things and still keep the mythology that every human just fundamentally connects with.